4.5 The rise of the factory and the double movement. Once the Industrial Revolution was underway, it quickly became self-sustaining. The earliest entrepreneurs made huge sums of money, which they invested in new ventures. Many of these new ventures were successful, generating additional profits to be reinvested. As this process continued, the factory came to be the center of the economy, transforming the commercial, agricultural, mercantilist system into a more urban, industrial capitalist system. The pace of change was breathtaking. In 40 years, Glasgow was transformed from a sleepy farming center to an industrial powerhouse with 100 mills producing manufactured goods, iron, leather, chemicals, and more. By the mid-1800s, many factory owners were wealthy and politically powerful. The factory was the most important institution in the community, determining what life was like for much of the population. Unfortunately for many workers, the transition to factory life was a difficult one. Agrarian peasants did not have an easy life, but they worked at their own pace, and there were times of the year when they did not have to work much, especially in the winter. In the unregulated factories of early capitalism, the pace of work was dictated by the machine, and the work hours pushed people to the brink of human endurance. So horrific were the conditions that in the late 1700s and early 1800s workers regularly smashed machines and burned factories as part of the Luddite movement. However, the Luddites were arrested and many were hanged in 1813. In essence, the factory system was imposed on a resisting population by force and by the lack of viable alternatives for a poor and desperate population. If we reflect on the major trends in the development of the market system, we see that national markets were initially created by mercantilist firms and monarchs in pursuit of gold and power. However, the expansion of markets was actively resisted by guilds and workers who sought to maintain their standard of living in any way they could, often using violence. Similarly, as England moved to manufacturing factories and laissez-faire capitalism in the 1800s, workers resisted the horrific conditions, as we will see in the next chapter. Along with the workers' movements, laws regulating factories and various forms of social legislation began to be introduced to mitigate the worst effects of industrial capitalism. This process of the relentless expansion of markets into new areas at the behest of the most powerful economic interests, coupled with the resistance of workers and communities to market expansion that threatened their livelihood, has been termed the double movement by Karl Polanyi. More specifically, the double movement describes how the push for the development of markets by businesses, first mercantilists and then capitalists, was met by a counter-movement by workers and communities to regulate markets to prevent them from doing too much destruction to society. In many ways, early capitalism was, indeed, an ugly thing, and it provoked strong reactions from those it victimized. This is the form of capitalism that Karl Marx described when he wrote, "Capital comes into the world, dripping from head to foot, from every pore, with blood and dirt." We turn to Marx and workers' resistance to the dark ages of capitalism in the next chapter.